Welcome everyone. It's so great to see all of you here. Last minute change because of issues over at our building, but we're happy to have you all here join us. For those of you that don't know me, I'll be your host for this evening. My name is Dr. William Gao. I'm a board member here at the Chinese Historical Society of America, and my day job, I'm an associate professor of ethnic studies at Sacramento State. So super excited to be able to host this event today with such a wonderful panel of speakers. This is our first time trying this with 5 full speakers, but I think that five speakers is 5 times better than 1. So we're excited to hear what all of them have to say. I'm going to do very, very brief introductions. I'll tell you who each of the people are. They'll be speaking in the order that you see them there. We've asked speakers to limit their talk to 5 to 7 minutes. So we want to have ample time at the end to let all of you all in the audience ask questions. So think of questions you might want to ask. We'll have at least 30 minutes at the end for Q&A. So yeah, as they're speaking, if you have something you want to ask them, jot it down or note it. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to tell you who we have here today and then call for first speaker. So all of these folks here are authors focusing on various Chinese American communities. We have Dr. Kristin Wong here, who will be speaking to us about Portland's Chinatown. We have Gerrye Wong, who will be talking about San Jose. We have Trish, Hackett, Nicola, who will be talking about Washington State. We have Brian Tom, who will be talking about Maryland. And we have Bruce Chen, who will be talking to us about Tehama County. So a wide range of Chinese American communities up and down the West Coast. And hopefully in this conversation section, in the second part, we'll get a chance to kind of hear how these communities relate to one another. So without further ado, I'm going to call up Dr. Kristin Wong and have her start talking to us a little bit about Portland.
Okay, can I say something so you don't have to
Hello? Is this better?
Yes. Is it still echo?
Is there an echo?
Still echo. Where's the other microphone?
Here.
Just use the other one. Test.
Testing?
That was better, I think.
Is it better now?
Yeah.
No echo.
Better?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you so much. I would like to give thanks to the Portland Chinatown Museum for collaborating with me on this project. And the proceeds from the book will go directly to them and help them with their mission. Now, interestingly, many Portland residents don't realize that there were actually two Chinatowns within its history. So today we're going to explore this fascinating history and explain why the community moved. Is this better?
Yeah, you have to be a little bit closer to the mic.
Portland's earliest Chinatown businesses soon expanded beyond the small shops and hand laundries. This 1890 photo shows one of the key buildings of the first Chinatown. With ornate wooden architecture, it efficiently combined commercial, social, and community spaces. Chinese immigrants quickly became one of Portland's largest ethnic groups, second only to German arrivals. Despite the immigration restrictions of the Chinese Exclusion Law of 1882, Portland's Chinatown continued to grow. It was a major port city with expanding industries and steady job opportunities. By 1860, Portland's Chinese community consisted of 22 individuals. As you can see, during the decades that passed, Chinese migrants were coming in from other areas such as Washington, California, and rural areas of Oregon, where there were active anti-Chinese campaigns and expulsions taking place. You can see a dramatic drop in San Francisco's population from 1890 to 1900, while Portland's community continued to grow. Portland's Chinatown population was actually second largest to San Francisco's. While Portland was not free of discrimination, it largely avoided the large-scale violence seen elsewhere, due in part to the influence of influential business members in the Chinatown community. However, this thriving district also faced environmental challenges. Before the seawall was built in the 1920s, this area was highly prone to flooding. And there was a great flood in 1894 that destroyed much of the downtown and Chinatown areas. And that, and then combined with the rising commercial interest in the area, it actually pushed the old Chinatown location north of Burnside. This continued over the next several decades into the area called Nihonmachi, or Japantown, and this created the new Chinatown area. This map illustrates the heart of the Chinatown locations. Portland's Chinatowns actually didn't have a rigid border like San Francisco and New York's. And so there's Chinese and non-Chinese businesses side by side, making a mixed commercial environment. Today, Old Town encompasses the Pioneer Place shopping mall in downtown Portland. Now, following the attack on Pearl Harbor in 1942, all Japanese residents were relocated and moved to internment camps. And so Japantown disappeared within a matter of weeks. Chinese businesses soon later occupied these empty spaces. Now, looking into the 1980s, the community also sought visible ways to preserve and honor its heritage. In 1986, the Chinese Consolidated Benevolent Association dedicated the Chinatown Gate, and it welcomes visitors into the historic area. Interestingly, not all Chinatowns in the United States have a ceremonial gate, and in fact, Portland's is one of the largest in the US. It's even larger than San Francisco's, so we are very lucky to have this in the city. Also in the year 2000, Lansi Chinese Garden opened. It was a collaboration between Portland and its sister city, Suzhou, which is renowned for its Ming-style classical Chinese gardens. Today, it remains the largest of its type in the US. Like many Chinatowns in the US, Portland is fighting to retain its historic ethnic identity and preserve the economic viability of its businesses and restaurants under the pressure of urban change. My hope is that this book helps preserve the over 175-year history of this remarkable community, and that it inspires the next generation to help keep shaping the future of the Chinatown, Japantown Historic District. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'd like to call up our second speaker here, Gerrye Wong, who will be talking to us a little bit about San Jose's Chinatown.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me? Yes. My husband says I have a big voice. Now, I don't claim to be an authority on the Chinese in San Jose, but today I want to tell you some details of the history of San Jose. In fact, I went on my phone today and I found some really interesting information from Siri. You ever try Siri? She told me that today San Jose stands at just a bit over 1 million people, of which 99,000 are Chinese, which is about 10% of San Jose. Total Asians, for your information, are 38% are Vietnamese. They top the Chinese at 114,000 in San Jose, and the Asian Indians coming third at 72,000. So that's interesting, isn't it? But taking that into perspective, let's go back to 178 years when the first 3 Chinese were recorded coming to California in 1848. But it wasn't until 1852 when San Jose recorded its first Chinese to come to the city, and they only had 34,000 people in San Jose. So with these stats in mind, I have to tell you about 5 Chinatowns in 5 minutes. I'll talk fast. Why 5 Chinatowns? You do it.
Okay, how about that? Tell me whatever you want me to change.
Anytime. Okay. So why did we have 5 Chinatowns? Well, in short, political, social pressures. They brought about fires, massacres, riots, city laws that caused the Chinese communities to keep moving and to relocating for survival. And yet, in spite of discrimination towards them, these Chinese continue to move, resettle, and make new cities for their succeeding generations. Hold on. The first Chinatown was the Market Street Chinatown, and it opened in 1866 with maybe 500 residents who had come to work in the local farms as laborers. It existed for 4 years before a mysterious fire came around and destroyed all of the figures. Moving just a few blocks away, the Chinese are going to move though. The second Chinatown was called the Vine Street Chinatown, and it was built and was a new community filled with restaurants, lodging, gambling houses, brothels, and dry goods stores. However, in 1872, the Guadalupe River that it was next to flooded, so the poor residents had to evacuate again, and they moved back to the original Chinatown on Market Street. Moving back to the center of the town, the third Chinatown was called the Plaza Chinatown, and it lasted 15 years from 1872 to 1887, and they had a really bustling community. They even had cottage industries making cigars, shoes, furniture, and even a broom factory. At that time, San Jose only had 20,000 citizens, of which Chinese numbered about 1,000. By the 1800s, they had gone many blocks and had expanded, and you could imagine the downtown merchants and the residents hated the growing Chinese presence in the central location of San Jose. The mayor and the city council even voted to eliminate the Plaza Chinatown on the grounds of it being a public nuisance and a health hazard. And that happened in March of 1887, but they never had to enact that law because somehow another mysterious fire came. Okay. This mysterious fire, they thought they had prepared themselves. They had built a big 10,000-gallon water tank. So when the fire brigade went, because this happened at 2 p.m. in the afternoon, guess what? The fire tank was empty. Somehow it had become empty, so within 2 hours, the entire wooden section of the Plaza Street Chinatown was demolished. Now, some people escaped, and they went to the fourth Chinatown called the Woolen Mills Chinatown because it was next to the woolen mills that employed many of the Chinese people. This small community lasted until 1902, when guess what? Another mysterious fire happened. Do you wonder why there's so many fires? I wonder. During this same period of the burnt-out Plaza Chinatown, residents had been contacted by a very kind German man named John Heinlein, who, despite protests from his fellow white community, he offered a land at 6th and Taylor for a small fee to the Chinese community. This was the longest lasting of all the San Jose Chinatowns from 1887 to 1931, and of course they named it Heinleinville in honor of this man who helped them relocate. And to protect that Chinatown, they even built a wall around it, a wall, and a night watchman to keep it from unknown enemies. And it was a wonderful, active, thriving community housing all of the Chinese now working in Santa Clara County, and it lasted for 45 years until the Depression hit it. Now by that time, the second generation had moved away for better working and living conditions in a more welcoming world, so only a few elderly men remained there. The city seized it because they couldn't pay the taxes in the 1930s, but the property lay dormant for many years until it eventually became the San Jose Corporation Yard. Heinleinville's last remaining structure, am I going over 5 minutes? Okay, it's going, the last remaining structure was Ushingong Temple. Can we show the temple? And it was interesting because the city historians wanted to save this temple because it was the last remaining one. And my father, ironically, was the one they asked to save it. he went before the city council to talk to them, but unfortunately, he did get a reprieve, but before he could raise the money, we had to move away, and so it was demolished. It was demolished. In 1947, and the city saved the altar. We have a beautiful altar. I want to tell you about this building in 1 minute. In 1986, we decided to rebuild that building, and we made it into a museum, which I want you to visit. It's called the Chinese American Historical Museum. It's in the San Jose Historic Park. And at that time, we gifted it to the city. We gave it to the city, who was not kind to our immigrants, but we gave it to them because we want them to know what's happening to the San Jose population and what happened before. So please come to see this museum. It's open every Saturday, and we have housed the altar, which is a beautiful altar, and we have had thousands of visitors come, especially school children, which we fund so that they can come and learn about Chinese American history. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gerrye.
So next up, we have Trish, Hackett, and Nicola, who's going to be talking to us a little bit about the Chinese in Washington State.
Can I take a picture of the audience before we start?
Yours to Joe?
Everybody smile, though, right?
Good afternoon. My book is a collection of summaries from the Chinese. Okay. My book is a collection of summaries from the Chinese Exclusion Act files held at the National Archives in Seattle. These are not full biographies, but through immigration interviews, they give a brief look into people's lives. The files were created because of the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 and its later amendments. They include interrogations, affidavits, correspondence, official forms, and usually at least one photograph. The files document how Chinese immigrants, even US-born citizens, had to constantly prove who they were. Seattle's Chinatown, now part of the Chinatown International District, grew in the mid-1800s as China immigrants worked in lumber, fishing, and railroads. After the Great Seattle Fire of 1889, the neighborhood rebuilt and became a thriving cultural center. It is home of the Wing Luke Museum and other historic landmarks. What makes this unique is the blend of communities: Chinese, Japanese, Filipinos, Vietnamese, and others, living and working side by side. Today, it remains a vibrant neighborhood shaped by history and still evolving. Across Washington, other Chinatowns tell a more fragile story. In Tacoma, a thriving Chinese community was forcibly expelled in 1885, and their neighborhood was burned down. As an act of healing, in 1993, the Tacoma created a Chinese reconciliation park. In Port Townsend, Chinese residents endured violence but weren't expelled. Their Chinatown did not survive a devastating fire in 1900, and there was an economic downturn. Their Chinese history is kept alive through the Jefferson County Historical Society. In Spokane, Chinatown disappeared after redevelopment tied to the 1974 World's Fair. Together, these histories show both the contributions of the Chinese community and the hostility they faced. The National Archives in Seattle has 50,000 Chinese Exclusion Act files. About 10 years ago, I started a blog sharing stories from these files to help people understand what's in them and how to access them. There are now over 300 stories that explain the law, the documentation required, and the intense scrutiny Chinese individuals lived under. This book grew out of that work. It focuses on people connected in Washington State, some of who may have spent time in California. It brings together their records and puts them into accessible human stories. One story from the book is about Li Young, the ancestor of Edwin Ma Ling. Young was born in San Francisco in 1871, so he was a U.S. citizen. When he returned from a trip to China in 1888, he was detained by immigration authorities. Even citizenship didn't protect him. After weeks of confinement and court battles, he was finally admitted. As an adult, he built his life as a merchant and raised a family living in Portland, Oregon and Seattle, Washington. After traveling to China and re-entering the United States, every time someone did, it was challenged. Before leaving for China, he was interviewed and needed to prove his status as a merchant and prove that he had done no manual labor for the last year. The scrutiny didn't end with him. In 1937, his grandson, Li Yuk-sui, arrived in Seattle at age 17 and was detained. Immigration officials questioned the entire family in great detail. I've got a... Just down in that page. Oh, okay. Thank you. They questioned him in great detail, even down to how many rows of houses were in their village in China. Small inconsistencies created doubt. Family members had to rely on memory and trust to prove who they were. After more than 4 months, he was finally admitted. This one family story shows how ordinary lives were turned into investigations and how identity itself had to be proven again and again. And yet it was also a story of resilience. From this story, this family came Ed Lee, who was the former mayor. He would later become the mayor, but he was the grandson of the person I was just talking about. These files remind us that behind every Chinatown are behind every Chinatown and every historical moment and in our individual stories of perseverance, family, and belonging. Thank you.
Next up, we have Brian Tom.
Thank you, Will. My name is Brian Tom. I'm the founder and director of the Chinese American Museum of Northern California, located in Marysville. My brother Lawrence and I have written 4 books on Northern California Chinatowns. Marysville's Chinatown, Sacramento's Chinatown, Locke and the Sacramento Delta Chinatowns, and Gold Country's last Chinatown, Marysville. One of the reasons I like working on these books is because they are stories or books of historical pictures, and these pictures tell us a better story of Chinese American history than the stereotypical history. I'm sure all of you heard the stereotypical history of Chinese Americans, poor, desperate peasants. From the poorest part of China, went overseas to escape the fighting, famine, and flooding in southern China. They took the lowest paying jobs, working for pennies a day, taking jobs from hard-working Americans. They didn't want to assimilate into American society, instead dreaming of the day when they could return to China and live a life of relative ease. How true is this the history of Chinese Americans? If you look at the pictures in the books we wrote, you will see a different story. There you will see Chinese American families, businesses, schools, social organizations, celebrations, and festivals. In other words, instead of never assimilating, they adjusted to American society and built lives here. Our first book was on the Marysville's Chinatown, a town where my brother and I are very familiar with, as we were both born and raised there. It is a town where our family has had a long history. Our grandfather, Ham Gong Fu, joined the California Gold Rush in 1851. He came with his second brother. He was only 13 at that time. They struck it rich, and his second brother went back to China. But my grandfather liked it so much here, he decided to stay. He opened a store on First Street in the heart of the Marysville Chinatown. He married Li Shi, and together they had 9 kids. On page 24 is a picture of the interior of his store with 4 of his sons and his youngest daughter. At page 57 is a picture of my father, A.M. Tong. He was the youngest of 5 brothers. There was a saying in the American Chinatowns of that era that the best jobs for a Chinese American man was to own gambling halls or become a Chinese doctor. 2 of my uncles owned gambling halls, and my father decided to become a Chinese doctor. So when he was 16, he went back to China, studied Chinese medicine, came back, and opened a Chinese medicine practice in Marysville. But that wasn't his true calling. What he wanted to do was become a businessman. So after he established his practice, he opened a number of businesses. He opened the Marysville Furniture Store, which is the largest furniture store in Marysville at that time. And the Save More department stores, a small chain of 3 stores, plus the Golden Eagle gas station. And he also developed real estate. Now on page 24, there's also a picture of the Chinese Empire Reform Association. This was the political party started by Kang Yue and Liang Qichao. This was during the end of the Qing dynasty, and China was trying to figure out how to adjust to the challenge of the Western powers. So the stereotypical history never takes into account the importance of politics in these Chinese American communities. On the Sacramento book, there is a picture of George Wong at page 90. He was a member of the Young China Association in 1910. The membership drew straws as he would assassinate a Qing dynasty prince who was coming to visit the U.S. George drew the short straw, so he got the assignment. He tried but failed. He was arrested and served 14 years in San Quentin. There's another layer of that story that affects me, because I didn't know until relatively recently that my third aunt, he was the brother-in-law of my third aunt. So there was a family connection there that I never knew about. And I think that's really true of a lot of Chinese Americans. They don't know, past the earlier Chinese Americans, what their ancestors were doing here in America. So in reading these different books, Arcadia books, take your time, don't just look at the pictures. Read the texts, read the introductions. You'll learn a lot of important information there. Now I want to say a few words about the Chinese American Museum of Northern California, where I'm the director and responsible for all the exhibits. About 1 year ago, I started working on a new exhibit called China-U.S. Relations, Past, Present, and Future. As part of that exhibit, we invited the Chinese General Counsel Yang to our museum. He actually came twice in the last year and showed a great deal of interest in our exhibit. Then I initiated contact with Wong of the Wenshan Prefecture in Yunnan province in China. He invited my wife and I to go to Wenshan to sign a friendship agreement with the Wenshan Prefecture Museum. That museum, incidentally, is about 100 times larger than my museum. It's because the prefecture, this Wenshan Prefecture, has a population of 3.6 million, and our population in Marysville is like 12,000. So there's a big disparity between the two museums. We are also invited to join a new organization called the Maritime Silk Road Association of Overseas Chinese Museums, and we accepted that invitation. And this is a relatively new association, but it shows the interest of the government in China to start forming all these different connections. So our museum feels it's very important as part of our educational mission to do this kind of outreach to different associations in China. 70 to 80% of the mainstream media tell negative stories about China. Are you aware of that? This is true even though there are so many positive stories. Poverty alleviation leading to the elimination of extreme poverty, modern infrastructure, low-cost university education, universal health care. Many of these things we don't even have in the U.S. As a result of this negative stories, many Chinese Americans have a distorted view of China. So we would like our museum to be a place for a more balanced view of China. An important reason taking a new view of Chinese American history is because what has happened in China in the last 40 years, where it's become the second largest economy in the world. Most stereotypical history was written when China was poor, but now scholars are studying how China became rich, the importance of family, education, collective decision-making, respect for elders. By looking at China, we can see how Chinese Americans did well in America. Thank you.
And it's my pleasure now to introduce our last speaker, and then people should be out there thinking about questions. Bruce Chin is going to speak for us for a moment.
Hi, my name is Bruce Chin. I used to be past president of CHSA, and I'm currently the vice president of the Helen and Joe Chu Foundation. I'd like to thank CHSA and Arcadia for making this book talk possible, and also to thank the authors for sharing their information. Also, in the picture, you'll see Joe and Helen Chu. They are my great uncle and great aunt. I also want to introduce to you their only grandchild, Jessica Chu, who is the president of the foundation. So the book basically contains a lot of, like the Arcadia series, historical pictures as well as documents. And it kind of snapshots the different generations and pictures of how people evolved during Tehama County in general. So Tehama County, when people ask me where, I tell them I'm from Red Bluff, they say, where is Red Bluff? It's in Tehama County. So on the map, the red shaded area is Tehama County, and the star is Red Bluff, my hometown. It has a different interesting in history. At that time, the river access was everything. And they have initial pioneers there, like William Brown ID, who was the leader of the Red Flag Revolt. And there you see him with his red Bear Flag Revolt, and he was declared president of the California Republic. And his home is in Red Bluff, Adobe home. Red Bluff was to be the state capital of the Bear Republic. And you got Peter Lassen. So Peter Lassen became a Mexican citizen in order to get a land grant from the Mexican government at that time. And he encouraged the migration up to Tehama County. And of course, there's a volcano named after him, Mount Lassen. And then we have another pioneer, William Stanford, who influenced the area by establishing the world's largest winery, which employed a lot of Chinese workers. So, Red Bluff is located on the Sacramento River, became known as the head of navigation because it marked the furthest upstream point that steamboats and river vessels could reliably navigate. Red Bluff's Chinatown functioned as a final stop where river commerce ended and overland travel began. It cemented its critical role in transportation and economic gateway for California's early development. Our research showed that Chinese president Tehama County dates back as early as 1848 before California became a state. Many of the Chinese first arrivals worked as domestic cooks and household staff for white families, forming the foundation of early community networks before a more formal Chinatown district emerged in Red Bluff and throughout the county. These early roles helped establish the first sustained Chinese presence in the region, laying the groundwork for a later Chinese community in Tehama County, even as exclusionary laws and social barriers shaped their lives. Now this is one of many immigration cases. This is one of the most remarkable historical events in our book, is that when the Chu family was detained in Angel Island, this petition, during the height of the Chinese Exclusion Act, stands as an extraordinary act of local support. More than 20 prominent white males from Red Bluff came together to support the Chu family's right to settle in their community. They were respected members of the town, petitioning in a very public way that the Chu family belonged to Red Bluff. The significance of this act cannot be overstated. This was rare, and it was backed by such a large and influential group of local citizens who challenged the prevailing narrative that who could belong in America. It reminds us that under the harshest constraints of the Chinese Exclusion Act, there were moments when individuals and communities acted differently, when they chose to connect over separation and recognition over rejections. Now, this is another example of the various people in Tehama County and Red Bluff. And this one is personal because he is my Uncle Ken Chu, or Dr. Ken Chu. Just imagine, without the petition of the Chu family from the previous slide, we would not be able to enjoy the shellfish all year long. Oysters, scallops, shrimps were available all year long because of one act of kindness resulting in the oyster being born, Dr. Ken Chu in Red Bluff. His work helped transfer shellfish from wild harvest dependence into reliable, sustainable farming systems. His innovation supported the global expansion of aquaculture, changing how seafood is produced and consumed. His influence extended internationally, including China, where modern-day bay scallops aquaculture along the coastal water reflects scientific progress shaped in part by his work and field contributions. The book stands out as part of his enduring legacy, preserving both his scientific contribution and broader history he helped bring forward. So, the question is, did your relatives live in Tehama County? Here's a very small list of people that we discovered during our research. It's an example of families that have discovered, we hope these readers will, the readers who will gain deeper understanding of the resilience, contribution, and community of Chinese Americans in North State, and feel inspired to preserve and share their own story, family stories too. If you believe your family may have come through the last steamboat stop in Red Bluff around the 1800s, we encourage you to reach out and maybe be able to help you uncover your family history, and even you can connect you to photographs and records of your ancestors. It's about the generation of Chinese Americans interconnecting throughout the country, the state, the nation, and internationally. Although many have left the county for other opportunities through the decades, a new generations of Asians are also migrating into Tehama County to start a new legacy. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So it's such a pleasure to have so many experts here on local Chinese American history. So what we're going to do now is I have a few questions for our panelists, and then we are going to turn it over to the audience in a few moments. So think about things you might want to ask them as I start here. So thank you all for these great presentations. I wanted to see if we could start by having each of you just tell me a little bit more about yourself and what drew you to do local Chinese American history.
My family is originally from Portland, and I moved down here for pharmacy school. But as I was researching my own family history, it kind of inspired me to look into what happened after the 1950s. There are several books on the history of Portland's Chinatown, but it only covered the first century. And my great-grandmother was born in the first Chinatown. My father was born in the second Chinatown. And so it's really through my father in which I was able to reach out to many of the community members that lived and worked in Chinatown, and now, they're in their 80s and 90s, so getting their personal stories and insight was very valuable for this project.
I became interested in San Jose's history because I have to confess, when I grew up in San Jose, I didn't know very many Chinese. I went to school with no Chinese. I didn't think I was Chinese. And so it wasn't until I became an adult and met other Chinese people, married a Chinese man, and raised Chinese children, that I thought, this is kind of interesting. We better start talking about our history and telling our kids what our grandfathers and our legacy in America. And so that's when I started the Chinese Historical and Cultural Project, which educated me on the history of Chinese here.
I kind of fell into it. I volunteered at the National Archives, and I worked the same day as a Chinese woman, Loretta Chin, and she kept telling me about the great stories she was finding in the files and showing me the pictures. And so I decided to work on the same files that she was working on. And I think the files, I think everybody should have a chance to find out who their family was. And it's really important for everyone, especially now, to know what has happened to the Chinese and what's going on now in our country.
My interest in Chinese American history goes back more than 50 years. I was a law student at UC Davis and started the Asian American Studies program back then. We were one of only 3 Asian American Studies programs in the state. This is back in May 1969. I became the founding coordinator of that program. These were the days of student power. Anybody remember that? And it was amazing as I look back on it, all the power they gave us. I wasn't a faculty member, but they gave me authorization to go out to hire tenure track faculty members. So I did hire 2 of them in that first year that I ran the program. So I've always had a long-term interest in it because our family has such a long history in Chinese American history. Almost all my relatives had something to do with Chinese American history. I have a cousin, Ben Tom, is my first cousin, my 4th uncle's son, who became the first Chinese American to win a citywide election in San Francisco. He got elected to the Board of Education. Anybody remember that? That seems like a long time ago. Anyway, there's a lot of things like that that drew me to the whole idea of understanding more about Chinese American history.
My interest became, when I grew up in Red Bluff, so it's just like 6 families in there. And I knew it was different because I got picked on. You know, most of us got picked on. And then I went to New York, met my grandparents, and was wondering, gee whiz, this is like China in New York City. Yeah, started learning about my other relatives, but as later on after college, I started to say, oh, what's our family history? So I started doing that, and that resulted in me having to learn Chinese American history. I went to CHSA. Somebody, when I came back west to finish up school, came to CHSA, somebody said, well, you should go to the Chinese Historical Society. That's how I started my journey in discovering my family history and how history impacted their family. Exclusion Act, my uncles and aunts in New York didn't want to talk about the family history because a lot of paper families, a lot of paper sons.
I think one thing that's interesting as we hear our panelists speak is that how many.
Battery might battery.
No, it's dead. All right. I think one of the things that's interesting hearing all of our panelists speak here is how many of them have been drawn to Chinese American history because of either local connections or because of genealogy. And I can say as someone who does this as a profession, that lots of the histories of Chinese Americans we would not have if we didn't have folks like this doing that work, right? If these people up here weren't doing that work, we wouldn't have histories of Chinatown and Red Bluff or Marysville or San Jose or Portland, right? Because there are very, very few doctoral students that actually do this type of work. So given that, we've got a wide audience out here. I'm wondering if any of you, what you all would say to kind of aspiring community historians that are out there in the audience, people that might want to either research their own history or that might want to research the history of their own communities. What type of advice would you give them? We start with you, Bruce, and go down this way.
Well, typical advice, I would say start with yourself, your family, because that's the starting point where you discover your family and yourself and also your community that they grew up with and the struggles they've gone through all these years. Yeah. Yeah, anyway, so I would just start with that, and especially with the internet now, you can discover a lot more faster, with AI and all that stuff. So, one thing I want to point out that I'm not really the true author of the book, it's Jessica, our president. She deserves the credit.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with Chris. Start with your family. Learn what you can about your own ancestors, because it's a very important part of learning more about, in general, Chinese American history. But I would, as the second point, I would recommend that in this book, there's an appendix called Chinese American History in 10 Easy Steps. So that might also be a good starting point.
So buy Brian's book, right? And then you can get the front of there, so.
I agree with the other. Start with your family. And of course, I'm going to say go to the National Archives and look at the Chinese Exclusion Act files. You just wouldn't believe all the information that's there. It might be hard to get to mostly because of the names. They could use their marriage name or nickname or just change their name. But the archivist can help you. And once you find one file, it might list 10 other files of your family. So just...
So Trish, you're saying, like, for folks that have never been to, let's say, our local branch of San Bruno, or who haven't been to San Bruno, they should start by just reaching out to an archivist, should they email someone, or...
Well, yeah, email someone.
And just say, hey, my name is this is my relative's name, can you help me locate this person?
Yeah, and give as much information that you know, not a lot, but,
Right.
date of birth and when you think they came over, just things that might help them find a file. And you can ask them what they need. In Seattle, you have to make an appointment to go in, and they need to pull the records, so they have to have an idea of what to look for. You can't just say,
Just show up.
yeah, right, yeah.
Thank you.
I'd say that start with your own family. Learn about your own history and learn it with your own kids. I learned it with my own kids. And I took them back to China, and we finally found a village. And I mean, it's so remote that you don't even think about it. I'm a fourth generation Chinese American, so for me to even want to show my kids and grandkids where it all started, and you can't believe how inspiring it was for them. They were so interested, and they are now telling their kids about it. So start with your own family.
I agree with the other panelists, and in addition to that, I also recommend looking into the local Chinese museums. They have a lot of names and records, and even like going to the city records, they also have things in their archives as well. But the important thing to have is like possible names and spellings and birthday, and with those pieces of information, you should be able to find some additional information when you do more research.
And Portland has a Chinese American History Museum now, doesn't it? Is that right? Or a
It's
society?
Portland Chinatown Museum.
Yeah. So I mean, we here at the CHSA we're the first one, right? But increasingly, communities have their own museums that you can start with lots of local folks to help you. So I have a few more questions, and then we'll turn it over to the audience. So tell me, in terms of, in the course of your research, was there one thing that you noticed that most surprised you, or that you didn't expect in the course of researching this?
Well, when I was researching Portland's Chinatown history, I was surprised by two things. That it wasn't just for the Chinese, but it was for the community. So in the late 19th century and early of 20th century, Chinese, Japanese, and African Americans were all marginalized communities. And in Portland, they were pretty much situated in the same location downtown. And so during the time of segregation, the Chinese restaurants would actually allow the African Americans to eat there. And so this created a unique cultural and safe spot for them. And this kind of, bridge gaps, within the community. And another interesting thing as well is that the Jewish American community also found a safe haven in the Chinese restaurants because they're open on holidays, including Christmas and Sundays, and they're low in dairy as well. So Chinese restaurants through the Jewish community also became a cherished part of their identity.
So Dr. Wong, you're talking about these kind of like inter-ethnic and interracial kind of connections. Were those two Chinatowns located in areas that were close to either Jewish American or African American communities?
Well, more in the second Chinatown.
Yeah.
It's where the culture's kind of integrated, because since Portland's Chinatown didn't have like a rigid, boundary, a lot of businesses were intermixed. So you had Jewish, Greek, Romani, and so on.
So the downtown was a very multi-ethnic space.
Yes.
The question is, what's one interesting thing that you learned about San Jose and doing San Jose Chinese or Chinatown and doing this research?
Well, I learned that here I was growing up as a kid, living in downtown San Jose, and I didn't realize that my father, who became a manager of a National Dollar store there, some of you know about the National Dollar stores, and it was the largest department store in San Jose, but I never thought of being Chinese, like I said, and he was accepted because he spoke English well. He was educated here, he's born here, and he was actually one of those that could be a spokesman for the Chinese. So I learned a lot by going through the history. I never asked him before what he did in his life. I really didn't know until thinking about, what about my family? What did he go through? And he went through that. He was actually invited to join the Rotary Club, the Scottish Rite, the Masonic, as the first Chinese in San Jose to ever be allowed to join these so-called white groups. So you learn a lot through joining organizations like this.
I have a different angle because I work with the records at the National Archives. So and I work with a group of people indexing the files, and we're constantly finding different stories, new stories, and pictures, the photographs that could be of a baby or someone in their 70s or 80s. And, not every file is interesting, but I'm always surprised that I've been doing this for 20 years, and we're still finding different stories that are interesting.
So a question on that. I've done a little research in Chinese Exclusion Act case files. So and I know that they've got record numbers that link them to other ones, right? But when you say you're indexing them, what exactly are you all doing? What's that process look like in the present moment?
Well, most of the archives have an index that is the name and the file number. And in Seattle, we're making it, we're enhancing it.
Nice.
We're putting the ship they came over on and the date, their date of birth, if they were married, what their occupation was, and any unusual items. Did they have a photograph? Were they married? Just all kinds of things like that. Things that would help you find that file.
And is that so? If any of the folks in the audience have family members that came to Seattle, is that searchable online, or do you have to go to Seattle to use it, or the index you're making?
You can you can contact the archives to look at the index. I have a copy of the index on my blog, and there are other organizations. I know Southern California Genealogical Society, they have an index on there. And there are indexes for the other facilities, the National Archives facilities, if they came in at a different port. So that's where you'd look.
Thank you.
Yes, I learned about, or I'm disappointed in how long the stereotypical history of Chinese Americans has lasted this long. I think everything will be changing soon because of the rise of China, and people are starting to understand the Chinese culture and how that applies to the Chinese Americans here in America. I think that's going to be an important break. So I also want to mention, Luke, I was done some very interesting work on Helen.
If you're into the Chinese in Hollywood, come talk to me afterwards. We can chat.
The impact it had on the LA Chinatown community.
Thank you.
So I'm going to pass this on to Jessica because she did the major work on this. And
Jessica, one interesting thing you found in doing this research.
yeah,
Hi, I'm Jessica. I am Joe and Helen Chu's only grandchild, and Bruce is my cousin, and he's too modest. Our book was created because Bruce spent years with my grandpa labeling our photos. I took those photos and found the families that go with the pictures in our book. But what I found that was interesting in that process is people weren't willing to share their stories until I showed proof of being from Red Bluff. I showed them either a picture of their family, because it was in our family photo albums that Bruce was labeling, or they knew that they were from Red Bluff, or they knew my family's name. So they, oh, the Chu family from Red Bluff, we know you. And that was really the only way to really open up these conversations. And then people were more comfortable talking about being a paper family, or maybe there were family disputes, and family of 10 got split in one way or another. There were adoptions that we found where they had too many kids. And so we had one family, the Wong family, they had twins. One twin went to the maternal side, one twin went to the paternal side, and I don't know what happened after that. But I found NARA has done a great job post-COVID digitizing the record. So if you pulled your record before, it would be very different if you pulled it now. Now it'll pull all the files that are connected to that serial number, and then you can find family serial numbers that were witnesses or testimonies in those records. So if you think you're a descendant of Tehama County, what I do is I take the phonetic names of the family names, I do a search through NARA thanks to post-COVID changes, and then I use the serial numbers to identify other family members, see if you recognize those family numbers, and I can go and find the ship records and take it from there. But it was very interesting. Number one, you've got to get people comfortable. Having photo evidence of who you are and where you're from helps. It helps to open up the conversations with people that knew your family. And then NARA is definitely a big partner. There's some files I pulled, they have like 40 names of the same name, all long. There's so many all longs. But I can go to NARA and go, can you help me? And show me the ones that have a photo. And those ones that have a photo, then I take it to the family. I go, do you recognize Mr. Al Wong? And then that's how we identify and match the family and kind of trace their origin stories through NARA. So, sorry, thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. So we're going to be transitioning now to the most exciting part of the evening, which is audience questions. We are down to one mic, so I guess I'll have to... Should I run the mic, or shall I... This mic is not working. Do you have another one? Yeah. Okay, so do we have questions out there? We'll make it work. Go ahead.
I know I'll buy the book online when I get out of here, because I got my free one already, but the two ladies between Seattle and Portland, I guess. Do you have any idea, I know I'll read about it in the book later, but do you have any idea why the populations between the two of them shrunk, and then the ones Chinatowns, like here in San Francisco, started to grow? Like, would it have been from the Chinese Exclusion Act or other factors like that? Because I really love that Asian Americans series from PBS, especially the Daniel Day Kim episodes, because I think he puts a really good spin on it, even though he's Korean American. I just love the episodes of that from it.
You had to hit it back.
So during that period, there's a lot of layers going on. So not only with the Exclusion Act, but it also, you have to look at what was happening in the local community. So like in San Francisco, like you mentioned, people were actually moving out of San Francisco because there was, violence in the city, and so they're moving to other areas like Portland. And I think the difference is that in Portland, the local leaders and the merchants had maybe a better relationship to the city and politicians, so that it kind of kept things from getting violent. Now, it didn't, discrimination was still there, but it just didn't erupt in violence like in other cities, like in Tacoma, San Francisco.
I have a graph of the Chinese population in the United States. It's not in this presentation, but it shows the population going up to 1890, and that's when the Exclusion Act started to take effect. And then it goes down, and then it starts going up again. And part of the reason it was going up was because they were allowing merchants there was an exemption for merchants, and they could bring their family and children, but they had to prove their relationship with them. But it was a bachelor society until then. And so once they started bringing their families, there were more and more Chinese.
Let's get a few more questions. Yeah.
I don't have too much of a question, but more of a comment. I've been going to NARA for about 50 years, almost. Anyway, you have to ask all your relatives that are living as soon as possible, because there's a lot of, I would say, lies, because paper sons and all this kind of stuff. So you ask your relatives, do you know the truth? And when you do this, you document it. The other reason why a lot of people don't talk is that they sign a thing on the bottom of the thing. I think it says $10,000 fine, or, at that time that was a huge amount of money. So they didn't do that. I don't know if that's what you found, but it's me.
So I think it's a very, very good point here, right? The importance of oral histories, right? If you're documenting local history or doing genealogy, oral history should always be the place to start. And I think that's what some of these folks were kind of alluding to when they were saying, start with your family members. I had a few other hands out there, I think I saw. Yeah, Spencer.
I just wanted to say I'm a testament of family research. My parents both. Oh, I'm a testament of family research. I just started 4 years ago. My parents had died of COVID. My dad was the family historian. We just had one document, and the Lisa Ling show popped up, and it talked about Cortland. And then I got your book, and my great-grandfather is on page 25 with the North American. And then through that research with Kelly Fong, I found Will doing the 5 Chinatowns, and then he told me, I told them about my grandparents moving from Sacramento to Watsonville, and then from there, it just snowballed, and he told me to go find the partnership papers, and that's when I started going to NARA.
Spencer hasn't published his book yet, but he's got enough information to publish it, so we'll have Spencer back when his Arcadian Press book comes out someday in the next decade. All right, next question, please.
This question is more for Jessica and Bruce. Red Bluff being in a remote part of the state, you have smaller pockets of Asian populations living there. But in our major centers like San Francisco, Oakland, Sacramento, you have traditional holidays, celebrations like Chinese New Year's, you know, and when you have a birth of a baby, you have the red eggs and ginger party. In the rural parts of California where you folks live, did you have those kinds of events also? Or did you have to go elsewhere to celebrate, you know, something like Chinese New Year's, for example?
Okay, in Red Bluff, when I was a kid, my mom and my grand aunt did that at the restaurant. So that was, no one explained. I asked my dad, I said, why do we do this? Why do we do that? You know, he didn't, just shut up and do it. You know? But when I went to New York, that was a different experience because all the aunts and uncles and cousins, my grandfather, we always had the celebration, Chinese New Year's, you know, Qingming, all that stuff I never knew about until I went to New York. And that was an eye-opener because it piqued my curiosity. Why did we do this? And that gave me a more cultural exposure, not only because being Chinese American in New York at that time, my narrow vision was Chinese laundry. So I went through a laundry experience, and that becomes, you know, Chinese American experience besides the restaurant. My grand aunt in Red Bluff had a Chinese restaurant. So I got that, and you know, the laundry, and that, you know, got me more curious. Why did we all do this? You know, so.
More questions up there. Yeah.
I think it was Gerrye who brought this up. Could you elaborate more about what Scottish Rite and Masonic means?
Scottish Rite and the Masonic group is a group that I think it's religious based somewhat, but it's a very secret society, and of course, none of those organizations would ask a Chinese to join. So I didn't realize that when my father said, you have to join the Rainbow Girls, which is part of this, because we have to show the Chinese are a part of it. I didn't want to, and I didn't, so that I was a bad girl. But think about it. I was growing up in San Jose in the 1930s. I'm really old now. I told my age. So just think about it. There weren't that many Chinese. I lived downtown. My father worked at a department store 7 days a week. We didn't go to San Francisco. I didn't have any context with it, but he obviously knew it was important that he join American organizations to be a representative. So I didn't appreciate that until I started looking into the history of San Jose and all of these Chinatowns burning down, and here we came in the 1930s, which was when the Chinatown was dying. And I want to tell you that I'm very proud to say that the city of San Jose came to Connie Young Yu and me and said we would like to issue a resolution of apology to the Chinese community because we had tried to show them the history. And so as a result, 2 years ago, they wrote a resolution of apology to the Chinese for all of the wrongs that the city had done. So that's why history is important, that all of you have to get interested in your communities and tell them what has happened in the past and what can happen in the future.
Gerrye, was that the last photo in your slide?
Yes.
Okay, I'll pull it up later so we can see the
Yes, that was when the mayor came and apologized.
Hi, I have a question and a comment. Thank you. So interesting and lovely to hear from all of you. The question is about bringing this into the classroom. I was thinking about that with what you were just saying. I work in the classroom teaching. I'm with the Shun Family Chinese Cultural Center in Oakland, and the founder of our center, Joe Shun, and the community founded it in 1953. And his great-granddaughter contacted us a few weeks ago because she's written a book about Chinese American history and the Shun family. So she's coming on May 30th, and we serve youth. We don't usually open our center to the public, but we thought this would be a really neat opportunity to explore the history together. So anyone who's interested, please come. We're not used to sort of running these types of events. You can talk to me after, but my question was about, bringing this into the classroom, whether any of the books that you've worked on have a curriculum component, or even the idea of, so we serve youth kindergarten to 10th grade, so it would be more like middle schoolers and high schoolers, around how maybe they want to do this kind of work themselves. So just wondering if you have any thoughts on it, or if there's anything out there that you could suggest.
Just for San Jose, our Chinese Historical and Cultural Project felt it was important. So we wrote a curriculum guide. We gave it to every school in San Jose, followed with a video that our Jessica Yu made when we opened our museum. So that is something every organization can do to bring this information to schools, because none of the textbooks told about Chinese history before, as you know. So that's what we did and continue to do now in upgrading it. Correct, President Kimberly Lee?
I mean, I'd say one thing too on that note. We have found, I'm on the program committee here, and we have thought a little bit about possibly running a workshop for teachers around oral history. So maybe I'll talk to you afterwards. If we can get enough interest, we can step in something. We have time for probably 2 or 3 more questions. Oh, I'm sorry. Please go ahead.
I'd like to find out more about that, because I think it would be good. I think my book would be a good way for kids to learn, because it's stories. So maybe we can talk.
Are any of that information online?
We'll get Bruce, comment and wait your question.
I just want to comment that museums are very critical for educational purposes for the general public and school children. CHSA has done that in the past, and I believe they may have a curriculum for the exhibit they used to have, the Exclusion, Inclusion program for educational purposes for public schools and stuff like that. So maybe get a look, ask CHSA for that. They still have their program.
Definitely. So we have a question from here. Please go ahead. Are you asking? Come on. Yeah. Okay. Other questions out there? Yes.
I appreciate the overflow crowd here. I was supposed to be over at CSHA, but I understand they had some issues with refurbishing. This is sort of a selfish appeal, but I'm from the Sioux family, and at 108 Waverly Place, there is a nice wall plaque on top of the building of the scaffolding or the awnings in the current business. And apparently that used to be the Sioux Association. If anybody knows anything about what happened to that building, or where we actually had, I believe, the Sioux Family Association meetings right at that building on the corner of Clay, please see me if you have any idea. I've reached out to a lot of people, and people don't know that. But I just really want to just make a comment. I've been at it for 2 years for genealogical studies, root studies for the heritage sake of my family, for them to know my past. I was close to my grandfather, was really a good source to kind of express his ideal about coming to this country and bringing his family over. He spent 25 years of his life first coming here and waiting for them to finally arrive here 2 years before Mao proclaimed PRC as on October 1st, 2 years earlier than that, 2 years later. But I'm glad they came here. They're refugees from China. And my comment would be, people are asking, how do I do research? Well, just keep at it. Because recently, I thought of things like when I went to high school and I found a reference to a lifelong friend family that worked at the Chinese theater in Chinatown, Los Angeles. And I said, yeah, that's Mrs. Tom. And I know the two brothers, we grew up together, from grade school, and that's how we have lifelong friendships and things like that. So you'll be amazed if you keep digging and you keep thinking of things, how far you can go. And, you know, in my case, I reached out to lost relatives in that sense from Canada, who are more distant, and even up here in the Bay Area, by mention of a genealogical book that I've been researching or looking for 22 months, and I finally hit that, the Family Search Center in Oakland, so thank you.
Well, one final question out there. Any last questions? Last word today.
When my grandson was in the 4th grade, he came home dressed like an Irish gold miner. So I looked at his social studies book. So we started, you guys know Corky Lee from New York? Yeah, get the big coffee table book, Corky Lee's Asian America. There's a lot in there. So anyway, Corky and Leland Wong, you guys know the our local community artist and photographer. So Leland's pretty sure that his great-grandfather or grandfather came from the railroad to Eureka and then here in San Francisco, but he hasn't had a chance to go to Eureka himself. So anyway, it took 5 years. Corky calculated 2014 was 5 years before the Transcontinental Railroad and the Central Pacific. So starting 2014, 15, 16, 17, went to Utah every year, and therefore the community connections, the Utah people were very happy, the Chinese in Utah, that the Chinese from New York that came from Corky, and then about 25 of us from here, the Bay Area, made it to Utah, and we changed the historic yearly celebration, which they call the Golden Spike. So the Irish workers were left out, as well as the Chinese. But when 2019, the 150th happened, the whole program was changed, and they started with 8 Irish workers carrying the rail from one side, 8 Chinese from the other side. That photo is on the front page of China Daily because a lot of people, it got a lot of international attention too. So we just have to continue, I think, hooking up, finding out which 4 Wong villages were mostly recruited to come work for the railroad. But as I continued with the history, the narrative was from 1865 to 1869, imagine going through manual labor, the granite mountains of the Sierra Nevadas. Okay, so 1882 foundation, Ted Gong in Washington, D.C., just opened an office in Sacramento, and then they're organizing I think it's a Chinese women's conference in Washington, D.C. in September, but they're East Coast, we're West Coast. We have to just keep making the connections, because the reason there's so few of us is the railroad, the whole country, United States, hit a financial depression. The railroad finished in 1869. Okay, well, the white labor that took the railroad out here couldn't get jobs with all the Chinese doing, all the labor. So I have only heard one person taught me this, and he runs the San Mateo History Museum. San Francisco's riots, where the famous Irishman,
Dennis Kearney,
Carney, however you say it, at the Sandlots. So it's where the library and the Asian Art Museum are in Civic Center. So, ranting and ranting, the Chinese must go. So there's that book. The other book is Gene Feltzer's book.
Driven out.
Driven out, yeah. So if we could get a community library, it would just help each other, you know, get the books, get more. The narrative is what they call the San Francisco Chinatown riot should be July 26/7, right around there, 1868. So the racism increased during the railroad and the gold rush, and then after 1869. So there was a financial depression in 1873. The anti-Chinese prejudice, right, grew with the labor competition, right? It's always about labor. So we worked with the Irish, so we got an Irish-Chinese railroad worker thing going, okay? And so you can see why the earthquake, no Angel Island, no Paper Sun, okay? So once you know who did a calendar, and we need to get them to do another calendar, is Bill Ong-Hing, the lawyer that works with all the undocumented and Spanish-speaking kids and families, people in detention. So at one time we had a calendar that put all the events on a timeline, and it would be good for CHSA to do that again.
All right. I'll give it to do any of our panelists have last words that you'd like to say to our audiences, or if not, we'll wrap it up and you can go out and meet folks, eat some food, and greet each other.
Thank you for coming.
Yes, thank you everyone. It's been a wonderful event. We have food here. Our panels will all be circulating around. You can meet them and talk to them individually. I'll be around as well if you have any questions. Thanks for coming out.
Good photo first. Good photo.